Welcome back. Today we're diving into something pretty remarkable, actually.
Hmm.
We're exploring this surprising connection between the really ancient, heartfelt words we find in the Psalms and those, well, dramatic visions of prophecy.
Ah, right, that connection. It's powerful.
This is the deep dive, and we're focusing on what you've brought us from Bible text and scholars and some favorite authors, specifically looking at In the Psalms, Part 2.
That's right. We've got these great resources here, and our aim is really to unpack how these, timeless psalms offer incredible perspective and hope, especially when you look towards future events.
Yeah, perspective and hope. That's good.
Think of it as finding those key insights without you having to sift through everything yourself.
Exactly. We want this to be your path to being well-informed, maybe with some surprising facts, and just enough context to make the complex feel a bit clearer.
Hopefully.
And look, if this deep dive sparks even more curiosity for you, just remember there are bonus and supplemental discussions available too. You can explore the material even further.
Absolutely, because ultimately our mission here is simple. We want to inspire you, educate you, and, well, invite you to see God's plan more clearly in your own life.
Inspire, educate, invite. I like that. So, okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with this theme of finding hope, even when facing final events.
Right. The core message right from the start is incredibly grounding, isn't it? Finding real hope in the Psalms, even as we think about the reality of what the Bible describes as, the end times.
And the memory text really sets that tone. It's Psalm 67, verses 3 and 4. Let the peoples praise you, O God. Let all the peoples praise you. Oh, let the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you shall judge the people righteously and govern the nations on earth. Selah.
Yeah, and what's fascinating there is how immediately it shifts the focus. It's not about fear of the future, but about God's character.
Oh, okay.
It points straight to his just rule. And notice, not just over one group, but over all nations. His righteousness, his governance, that's central to understanding prophecy itself.
That makes sense.
It's almost like, a blessing promised way over in Revelation 1, verse 3 for understanding these prophetic things. It seems directly linked to seeing God's wider reign and his desire for all peoples to praise him.
So it's not just about knowing the sequence of events, but knowing the one who's ultimately in charge.
Precisely. Knowing his character.
Okay, that leads us nicely into the next section, focusing on Psalm 46. The title given is A Very Present Help in Time of Trouble.
Yes, and this psalm is presented as such a powerful source of hope, not just for navigating the everyday troubles of life, but also those bigger conflicts playing out behind the scenes, sometimes called the great controversy, right? That cosmic struggle.
And verse 1 of Psalm 46 is so direct, such assurance. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble. It's a promise specifically for the hard times.
Absolutely. And this applies directly, doesn't it, to the challenges we face today, but also looking ahead to those difficult events described in prophecy. You think about Revelation 13, Revelation 14. The text is saying that knowing God's goodness, his power, his unchanging character, that knowledge is the essential help you need when trouble hits, whether it's personal trouble or, global turmoil.
It reminds me of that image, I think, from a favorite author about not taking your eyes off Jesus when the, quote, boisterous billows rise. Like Peter on the water.
Oh, right. Good parallel.
Even when things are confusing or perplexing, we can trust him completely, knowing he is totally absorbed in what happens to us.
That's a beautiful way to frame it. Trusting in him is the help. It's active.
So how does this hope connect with the bigger picture? Global turmoil, the end of things. One part looks at the Earth's final state before it's made new.
Yes, it delves into that really vivid imagery you find in Jeremiah chapter 4, verses 23 to 26. It paints a stark picture, doesn't it? The earth after God's final judgment, but before the new creation.
Stark is right.
It uses language similar to Genesis earth, without form and void, mountains trembling, no people, no birds even, cities broken down.
So, wait, this isn't the beginning. It sounds like Genesis 1.
Right, that's the key point the material makes. The context shows it's not creation, but a future desolate state. It's the outcome of the destruction that happens right before Christ's second coming, a kind of purification before renewal.
Okay, I see. And how does that desolation relate to, human efforts and kingdoms?
It really highlights the ultimate failure of human systems, human kingdoms, human governments. It connects to visions like Daniel 7, where earthly powers are shown as beasts rising from turbulent seas, that chaotic Gentile world.
Right, the beasts from the sea.
These human systems, often built on self-interest, leading to conflict. They ultimately fail. They can't bring lasting peace or solutions. The material points out pretty directly that earthly leaders and governments are fallible.
And you can see echoes of that today, can't you? Issues with how resources are managed, systems that create huge disparities. It sort of touches on how many problems come from flawed human management. Not making a political point, just observing the outcomes.
Precisely. And this raises that vital question, where do you find real security when things seem so unstable?
Good question.
The material points us away from earthly kingdoms towards our heavenly citizenship. Philippians 3.20, right? Our true security is in here. Ezekiel's vision even shows God's stable throne high above all the earthly chaos.
But then Psalm 46 comes roaring back, doesn't it? Verses 6 and 7. The nations raged, the kingdoms were moved, he uttered his voice, the earth melted. The Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our refuge.
Yes. It underscores that God's voice, his power, has the final say over all the earthly noise and raging.
So the core insight.
The core insight is clear. Prophecies like Daniel 7, even though they show difficult events, the rise and fall of powers, understanding them ultimately provides assurance.
Assurance? How so?
Because they show God is still in control. He's working towards a positive outcome for those who trust him, even through the chaos.
So even when the world looks completely out of control, prophecy actually shows God's ultimate plan, assuring us things will work out well for the faithful. That perspective. Yeah. Wow, that's incredibly hopeful.
It really is. And speaking of that positive outcome, the discussion shifts nicely to under his feet. This focuses on the bright, long-term future described in Psalm 47, verses 1 to 4.
Okay.
This psalm is just this vibrant call for universal joy, for praise, because God is revealed as the great king over all the earth.
Yeah, it paints that powerful picture. God subduing nations, choosing our inheritance for us.
Yes, and a really key insight from the material highlights the symbolism of the foot here.
The foot.
Yeah, representing ownership, dominion. It echoes God telling Abraham back in Genesis 13, verse 17, to walk the land like an act of claiming it.
Ah, I see.
And this resonates deeply when you remember that, well, humanity basically handed over dominion to the adversary way back, didn't we?
So how does this foot symbolism connect specifically to Christ in prophecy?
Okay, so the materials contrast two really significant moments involving Christ's feet. First, you have 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 13 to 17.
Right, the second coming.
Where Christ descends and believers meet him in the air. Notice, his feet don't touch the earth at that moment. It's about gathering his people to him.
Okay, so that's the first moment and the second.
The second is over in Zechariah 14, verse 4. It explicitly states that at the end of the 1,000 years, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. And the mountain splits.
Wow.
So these show two distinct but related aspects of his sovereignty, gathering his people, yes, but also his literal physical return to reclaim and rule the earth, establishing his kingdom in a very tangible way.
And a favorite author describes that final scene so vividly. Christ descending on the Mount of Olives, the very place he ascended from.
Exactly.
Followed by the glorious New Jerusalem coming down from heaven, and like we read in Revelation 21.
It's the ultimate scene of triumph, restoration. Zechariah 14, verse 9 sums it up. The Lord shall be king over all the earth. Full stop. This signifies the complete final restoration of God's dominion.
It really underscores the immense hope we have.
Totally. If death was the end, life would be, well, ultimately futile, wouldn't it? But the promise of reigning with Christ, Revelation 11.15, Daniel 7.14, talk about this. It gives life ultimate meaning, purpose.
So this future, it's not something to dread at all for those who choose to be with Christ. It's actually a cause for loud songs of joy.
Absolutely. Which leads into the next section, wine and blood. This brings together Psalm 75, the Last Supper in Matthew 26, and that critical warning in Revelation 14.
Ah, the third angel's message part.
Yes, particularly the part about calling people away from false worship, which mentions drinking the wine of God's wrath.
That's quite a combination of ideas. Wine, blood, wrath. How does Psalm 75 shed light on God's judgment?
Well, Psalm 75 depicts God as the ultimate judge. He lifts some up, puts others down, and it includes this imagery of God holding a cup of foaming wine.
Okay.
The material suggests that maybe the historical background for this psalm could be the destruction of Sennacherib's army, in Kings 19 and 2 Chronicles 32.
Oh, right, where the Assyrian army was wiped out overnight.
Exactly. That event could serve as a kind of foreshadowing, like a mini picture of the final destruction of the wicked described way over in Revelation 20.
So judgment isn't just arbitrary punishment then?
Far from it. A key insight here is that judgment is partly about correcting the misuse of power. And that misuse fundamentally stems from human self-centeredness, right? And rejecting objective moral standards, God's standards. One scholar mentioned cautions against that kind of ultimate self-reliance, the kind that rejects any higher authority. The materials also frame sin not just as breaking rules, but as a breakdown of trust, love, truth, a departure from the very operational laws God built life upon. Sins are like symptoms of that deeper heart condition.
And God, the material notes, he cannot use force to gain love or trust. He can't compel conscience.
That's such a crucial point. It underpins his methods, doesn't it? Now, about the wine symbolism itself. Prophecy uses it in two main ways. Yeah. There's the wine of salvation. That represents Christ's blood, his life given for us, like at the Last Supper in Matthew 26. That's the cup of blessing. But then there's the wine of wrath, or judgment, like in Revelation 14. And the profound truth is, God desperately wants you to partake in the cup of salvation so that you don't have to face the cup of judgment.
He offers the choice.
He does. The material adds an interesting thought that sin itself is like combustible material that sinners cling to, which ultimately leads to their destruction when God's presence consumes it.
This helps us understand maybe why we shouldn't judge the future only by the negative things we see now. The erosion of values, godlessness.
Exactly. While we absolutely must work for good and stand for right now, the material stresses that the ultimate fix, the supernatural rectification, requires God's direct intervention, the complete end of this present world and the recreation.
So our ultimate hope isn't in human efforts fixing everything.
Right. However well-intentioned those efforts are, the final hope is in God's promise to set things right completely.
That perspective, it leads really beautifully into the next theme, that your salvation may be known. This connects Psalm 67 again to the mission given to God's people, especially like in Revelation 14.612, the three angels' message is God's final global appeal.
Yeah, and the material uses a really striking analogy here. It talks about this MIT-developed black coating that absorbs nearly all light, like super black.
Okay. How does that relate?
It contrasts that with what God intends for his people. Not to be like that black coating, just absorbing the blessing for ourselves.
Oh, I see.
But to reflect his light to the world.
And Psalm 67 verses 1 and 2 make that explicit, don't they? May God be gracious to us and bless us, so that there's the purpose clause, so that your ways may be known on earth, your salvation among all nations.
Exactly. The blessing is given for a reason, so that his character, his plan of salvation are made known globally.
It ties back to Israel's original calling, right? To be a light to the nations. Isaiah 56.7, a house of prayer for all nations.
Yes. But the material is also honest. It acknowledges that God's people throughout history, ancient Israel, the Christian church, at different times, have often failed in this mission.
How so? How have they failed?
Well, tragically, sometimes by hoarding the blessing, or viewing themselves exclusively, like their hearts were painted with that dark coating, absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. It cautions against seeing ourselves merely as like an exclusive departure lounge, just waiting to leave, rather than being an active center for outreach, sharing the light we've been given.
That's a strong image. And in contrast, Revelation 14 paints this vibrant picture of a people actively spreading God's final message all across the earth, calling others out of confusion towards God.
And this really brings up the key question posed in the material. What obligation, what calling should you feel individually and together with others towards teaching others the truths that you cherish?
It's not just about knowing it for ourselves.
Not at all. It's meant to be a passionate calling that leads to action.
It really invites you, to consider your own role in actively sharing the light you've received.
And finally, the discussion moves to further thought and invitation. This brings together several themes. Unity, from Psalm 133.
Like oil running down Aaron's beard.
Right. And the power given by the Holy Spirit for mission from Acts 1. Christ's redemptive work in Revelation 5. And one favorite author offers this insight about the unique fullness of the Spirit's outpouring after Christ's ascension, specifically to empower this final mission.
It all comes together. And it reiterates that understanding prophecy isn't just like an academic exercise, is it? It's deeply connected to understanding God's character and his ongoing relationship with humanity.
Exactly. And to illustrate how this study really impacts lives, the material shares the story of Diana and Loren. It's presented as an example of how God works in individual life through studying the Bible text, through the influence of his people, leading to real transformation and baptism.
That's a beautiful, tangible example.
Yeah.
It brings home the hope we've been talking about, God's refuge in trouble, the certainty of his future kingdom, the amazing promise of life with him, and that powerful call to share this incredible hope.
It really does bring everything together in a personal way.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Psalms and prophecy,
Oh,
we've seen how these ancient words offer such a powerful message of hope and purpose when we view them through the lens of future events.
it's just a profound reminder, isn't it? God is in control. He has a plan that covers all of history. And he invites you not only to be part of receiving salvation, but also to actively share it with the world around you.
And remember, if you do want to explore these incredible themes even more, those bonus and supplemental discussions are waiting for you.
Yeah, definitely check those out. And maybe here's something for you to ponder this week. Considering everything we've talked about today, God's ultimate victory, his complete power over all the chaos, the absolute certainty of the coming restoration, how does really trusting in that complete certainty change how you approach and face the uncertainties in your own life right now, today?